All right, so welcome to part two of Black History Facts with Crystal. It's going to follow the same format as the first video. Again, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the Black History Facts. Langston James Hughes, born in 1902, an American poet and central figure for the Harlem Renaissance. Born in Joplin, Missouri, graduate of Lincoln University in 1929. He worked at a variety of jobs and lived in several countries, including Mexico and France. The publication of The Weary Blues in 1926 is his first volume of poetry, which enabled Hughes to attend Lincoln University, where he graduated in 1929. His writings, which often uses dialect and jazz rhythms, is largely concerned with depicting African American life, particularly the experience of the urban African American. Among his later collections of poetry are Shakespeare in Harlem from 1942, One Way Ticket 1949, and Selected Poems in 1959. Zora Neale Hurston, possibly born in 1891, an African-American writer in Alabama. She grew up in a pleasant all-black town in Eatonville, Florida, and moving north, graduated from Barnard College, where she studied with Franz Boas. An anthropologist and folklorist, Hurston collected African-American folktales in the rural South and sympathetically interpreted them in the collection of Mills and Men, 1935, and Tell My Horse in 1938. A third volume of tales, Every Tongue Got to Confess, was discovered in manuscript and published in 2001. Hurston, a significant figure in the Harlem Renaissance, was also the author of 4 novels, including John Gord's Vine and the influential Their Eyes Were Watching God. Her plays included comedy Mool Born, written in collaboration with her friend Langston Hughes. Maria Jimenez Romans. Maria Jimenez Romans is an Afro-Latina author who wrote a wide array of books and does a lot of speaking on Afro-Latina living. She's dedicated to raising awareness of Afro-Latinas in the United States. She has used her own experiences as a Black Puerto Rican to educate the world on Afro-Latinidad and to bridge the gap between the presence of African Americans and Latinos in the United States. The limited view left me concerned about my Blackness because I grew up as a Black Puerto Rican, and I'm very cautious of how race and ethnicity have both impacted my life, she would say. Pierre Thomas does a noteworthy work on Afro-Latinidad in the United States, discussing the racism, identity issues, and poverty he experienced during his lifetime growing up in Spanish Harlem, New York City. The Cuban Puerto Rican poet created a piece of literature that shone light on his community. As a darker-skinned Latino, he faced discrimination both from his family and society as a whole. His father reportedly preferred his lighter-skinned children, according to the New York Times. During his youth, he used to sell drugs and ended up in prison after he hurt a police officer. During his 7 years in prison, he finished high school and turned to writing. The work he created was trailblazing, that his editor told him that with Down These Mean Streets, Pitter created a new genre on where everybody speak like themselves. He also became involved in his community and advocated for at-risk youth. In Carmen Dolores Hernandez, Puerto Rican Voices in English, interviews with writers, Pitter said that if people wanted to know what he had done after writing his novels, all they had to do was ask the communities, the schools, the universities, and colleges. Physician, sociologist, and politician Jose Celso Barbosa was one of the first Puerto Ricans and persons of African descent to receive a medical degree in the United States. But he also made history in plenty of other ways. He served in the executive cabinet under Puerto Rico Governor Charles H. Allen and joined the first Puerto Rican Senate. Barbosa, who advocated for statehood, also established El Timpe, the island's first bilingual newspaper. Gwen Ifill, the late TV show television news anchor whose father was Panamanian and Barbadian descent, left a mark on American media. As one of the first Black women to host a nationwide television televised public affairs program in the United States, she paved the way for other journalists of color. Ifill worked for the United States for the Washington Post, the New York Times, NBC, and PBS, and became the first Black woman to moderate a vice presidential debate. After her death in 2016, PBS published a piece titled Dear Gwen, Letters from Female Journalists of Color She Inspired, which showed how deeply her legacy is. For Gwen, championing diversity in journalism was necessary. She would go to say, diversity is essential to the success of the news industry, and journalists may include diverse voices in their coverage in order to reach a broader audience. We have stories to tell, but many in our audience have stopped listening because they can't tell that we're not talking about them. Sylvia Del Villard was no stranger to the performing arts. The actress, dancer, and activist faced discrimination as she pursued her studies at Fisk University in Tennessee. When she moved to New York City, she began taking an interest in her roots. Joining a ballet group called the Africa House, she also went on to establish the Afro-Puerto Rica El Coque Theater with the Pan American Association of the New World Festival, named as the most important authority of Black Puerto Rican culture. In the 70s, she and Carmen Belen Richardson also spoke about how racism faced by Black artists in Puerto Rico's media. In 1971, she released a press release criticizing racist casting practices in television that limited opportunities for Black actors and actresses in the ongoing use of blackface. Scott Joplin. Scott Joplin, born in 1868, was an American ragtime pianist and composer, born in Texarkana, Texas. Self-taught, Joplin left home in his early teens to seek his fortune in music. He lived in St. Louis from 1885 to 1993, playing in saloons and bordellos. In 1894, he moved to Missouri and played second cornet in a local band. For the next 2 years, Joplin toured with vocal ensemble he had formed and made his first efforts as composing ragtime. When the group disbanded in 1896, he returned to Missouri, where he stayed for about 4 years. During this time, he studied music at George Smith College, an educational institution for Blacks sponsored by the Methodist Church. In 1899, Joplin published The Maple Leaf Rag, and its success was instantaneous. Joplin continued to write ragtime music and moved in 1909 to New York City, where he had considerable success until 1915. When at his own expense, he produced a concert version of second ragtime opera, Tremonisha, a racial and spiritual parable that failed to gain recognition. Desmond Tutu. Desmond Tutu, winner of the Nobel Peace Prize in 1984, Bishop Desmond Tutu is a world-renowned religious leader who has fought diligently against apartheid, xenophobic violence in South Africa, and other violence against humans being both black and white. He was born in South Africa in 1931 and has been honored with many awards. He has also served many high posts, including General Secretary of the South African Council of Churches, Dean of St. Mary's Cathedral in Johannesburg, and Bishop of Lesotho. Shaka Zulu. Shaka was a famous African Zulu king and warrior. He was born in 1786 and was the son of Zulu chief Sanazakona. At the age of 26, his father died and left Shaka's brothers as king. As a prime example of his ruthlessness, sometime around 1820, he killed his brother and became king. He would become famous for his brutality. Shaka was a military genius, training his warriors in special military tactics and the use of modern weapons. Under his rule, the Zulu people became a powerful nation, numbered over 1 million. His troops were feared by enemies, and his motto was death or victory. Cetshwayo. Cetshwayo ruled over Zulu kingdom from 1872 to 1879. and was the king during the Anglo-Zulu War. In 1879, his army defeated the British at the Battle of Isdalawana in Zululand, South Africa. This was the worst defeat the British would ever experience against an African enemy. However, the British eventually regrouped and Cetewayo was captured and imprisoned. 3 years later, Queen Victoria granted him pardon and he returned to his homeland. In 1884, he died from what was believed to be a heart attack, but many may have believed that it's been poisoned. Kofi Annan. Kofi Annan was a seventh Secretary General of the United Nations, serving from 1997 to 2007. In 2001, he won the Nobel Peace Prize. He was born in Ghana on April 8, 1938. He influenced world politics in a positive manner and worked diligently at resolving conflicts between nations in a peaceful manner. Grantley Adams, activist and Bajan national hero. He was born in Barbados and became the first premier of Barbados and the only prime minister of the new defunct West Indies Federation. He was a social reform bent on achieving human rights for Bajans and a founder of the Barbados Labour Party. Grantley Hubert was born in Colliston, St. Michael, Barbados on April 28, 1898. Paul Bogle, freedom fighter and Jamaican national hero. Since 1969, Paul Bogle led the famous Moranta Bay Rebellion in 1865, which turned out to be one of the defining moments in Jamaica's struggle for political and economical advancement. Sergeant William Robinson Clark, RAF pilot. William Robinson Clark, the first black pilot to fly for Britain, died in April of 1981. He was buried at the military cemetery at the Up Park camp in Jamaica. Elaine Brown, chairman of the Black Panther Party, born in 1943 in Pennsylvania. Born in heavily black and impoverished North Philadelphia, Brown attended a predominantly white experimental elementary school where she studied ballet and classical piano. Brown's childhood was starkly divided between the comfort of her schooling and her realities of her home life. Following high school, Brown entered Temple University but left the campus for Los Angeles, California, before the end of her first year. As a member of the Los Angeles chapter of the Black Panther Party, Brown helped establish the party's first free breakfast for children program outside of Oakland. By 1971, Brown became the editor of the party paper, the Black Panther, and was soon elected the first female member of the Black Panther Central Committee. At a party committee, Huey Newton's directive, Elaine Brown made her first run for Oakland City Council in 1973 in tandem with Bobby Seale's mayoral bid. Although neither Brown nor Seale were elected, both won solid support of political reawakening black Oakland population, expanding the Black Panther consistency. In 1974, Huey Newton ousted Black Panther Party co-founder Bobby Seale from the party, and 2 days later elevated Brown to the position of chairwoman. When Newton fled Cuba, Brown solidified her position as leader of the male-dominated party and worked to redefine Panther's revolutionary program to include aspirations of the black woman. Carter G. Woodson, historian, educator, born on 1875 in North Canton, Virginia. Taught to read by family members, Woodson worked as a coal miner in West Virginia and put himself through school. He graduated from Berry College in Kentucky in 1903, hired to teach English in the Philippines. Woodson studied Romance languages through correspondence courses. After returning to the United States, he began teaching at Dunbar High School in Washington, D.C. In 1912, he earned a Ph.D. in history from Harvard University. He was the second African American to earn a Harvard doctorate. Woodson was an active promoter of black education. He founded the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History, the Journal of Negro History, Associated Publishers, and the Negro History Bulletin. In 1926, he began promoting Negro History Week during the second week of February to celebrate the birthdays of Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass. In 1960, it became Black History Month.